Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be previewing the 2023 Edmonton Elks. So to start, as always, let's talk about their previous season in 2022. The Elks finished 4-14 last year, missing the playoffs for the second consecutive CFL season, and it was kind of a feel-it-out year for them. New regime there, Chris Jones taking over as the GM and head coach there last season, and really just tried to get a feel of the roster, really overhauled a lot of pieces, a lot of guys coming in and on and off the roster weekly, and I think that really contributed to the overall poor season that they had. They were just really trying to find the right mix, and then I think by the end of the year, they were able to uncover a couple of really big gems on that roster, but at the end of the day, it didn't lead to a lot of wins last year. But then that leads us to their offseason, which obviously was very busy. In terms of their biggest addition, it's pretty obvious, and that is wide receiver Eugene Lewis that they bring in from the Montreal Alouettes. He was many people's #1 free agent in the entire CFL this offseason, myself included. Just such a dynamic player, arguably the best receiver in the CFL today. Such a big catch radius, can do a little bit of everything for your offense, and it's just such a big weapon to have for this Edmonton Elks offense. But on the other hand, they lose wide receiver Kenny Lawler, who was one of the best receivers in the CFL last year for Edmonton, and he goes back to Winnipeg after a year away. So these two guys, you could argue, it's really been offset here with the addition of Lewis, but I think Lewis is a slightly better player. And they did add other pieces such as Steven Dunbar, Kyron Moore. They have Dylan Mitchell coming up. I think it's a really good wide receiving core. Now, talking about the roster, I think, this roster is just very dichotomous in my opinion. There are some holes here, but I think there are some actual blue chip players that they have uncovered and brought in the last couple of seasons here. And it should be a very interesting team to see unfold this year. So starting with their offense, I have them ranked as 4th in the CFL, which may seem super high from some people, but I think when you factor in the playmakers, the running back position, I think those are really the strengths of that offense. The playmakers in general, just such a dynamic group in my opinion, and I think that's what drags them all the way to 4th on the list. The offensive line's all right. There are questions at quarterback we'll get to in a minute, but I think that overall the offense has really done a good job to improve their talent level over the past couple of seasons here, because you look a couple of years ago, this Edmonton offense didn't really have a direction, and I think you're starting to see that with this team this year. Now, in terms of their defense, I'm less optimistic about them. I still think they're the worst defense in the CFL going into this season on paper. I do think they're improved. They bring in a couple of good pieces. Luchez Purifoy, AC Leonard should help the defensive back room and the defensive line respectively. But at the end of the day, I don't think they brought in the pieces to really improve their run defense, which was atrocious at times last year. The linebacking core has questions, especially if Niles Morgan cannot stay healthy again this season. I think he's a really key part of what they do in the middle of that defense, but if he misses time like he has the past couple of years, I think that defense could be in trouble in terms of stopping the run. The secondary has a lot of holes and inexperience there. There are some experienced players there like Aaron Grimes and Ed Gainey back there, but at the end of the day, I don't think that it's a strength for them. So I'm really not that optimistic about this defense this season, at least in terms of the talent level on paper. But I think Chris Jones, being a defensive mind, may be able to get more out of this unit than I am expecting. And then in terms of their Canadian talent, I actually have them ranked as last in the CFL. I mean, someone had to be. I think that there's just a lack of that true star Canadian player on this roster. They don't really have a star wide receiver as a Canadian. Their offensive line group's not the most special in the world to me. And then you look over on the defensive side of the ball, you have guys like Scott Hutter at safety, who played pretty well last year, but not a superstar in my mind. You have Enoch Laconzo, who was their first-round pick last year, saw a lot of playing time down the stretch last year. He has potential to develop into a star, but I really don't think there's that true superstar player as a Canadian on this roster, and that's what really drags it down to the bottom of my ranking here. Now, with that said, the big wild card here is quarterback Trey Ford, who may or may not, see some time as a starter this year. He started a couple of games last year before getting hurt, so I'm very interested to see what happens with that quarterback position this year if Trey Ford eventually gets his shot and takes hold of that job. All bets are off in terms of where this team would rank by the end of the year for me in terms of Canadian talent. But for me, right now, it's last in the CFL. Now, in terms of strengths for this roster, I think that playmakers on both sides of the ball are really their strength. I think on offense, obviously the wide receivers with Eugene Lewis, I think is going to prevent a lot of matchup problems for defenses that they really haven't had that kind of player the last couple of seasons. Yeah, they had Kenny Lawler, but he was basically by himself. Eugene Lewis will not be by himself with all those other guys that I mentioned. Dylan Mitchell, I think, is going to be one of the biggest breakout stars in the CFL this season alongside of him. Stephen Dunbar, who they paid a bunch of money to in free agency, I think they're going to use him a lot as well. Kyron Moore is a really good utility guy in that receiving corps. So I think at the end of the day, the playmakers are really going to carry this team to some wins this year. And I really like Kevin Brown as the running back there. He looked incredibly explosive at the end of last year. And I think he really has the potential to be the best running back in this league. I really do, just from the short sample size that I saw him last season. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they have playmakers as well. A.C. Leonard has led this league in sacks before. They bring him in as a quiet addition after he was cut from Saskatchewan. Luchez Purifoy in the defensive back room, I think same thing. He can move around, be the strong side linebacker, be the safety, be the halfback for your team. He just does a little bit of everything, makes a lot of plays in a variety of ways. And I think that with those kind of guys on the defensive side of the ball, that could really equal out everything that I just said about the talent level on defense. If they could be an opportunistic unit, play above their, weaknesses that they have on that side of the ball, I think that they have a good chance to succeed. So we'll see what happens with those playmakers that they brought in this offseason. I think it will make a big difference for this team this season. Now, in terms of weaknesses for this roster, I think you have to start at the quarterback position where it remains a big question mark for this team. Taylor Cornelius saw a big improvement over the last couple of months of last season, so we'll hope to see that continue going into this year, but I still didn't think it was where it needed to be in terms of being a winning starting quarterback in the CFL. Still a guy that completes in the 50% range of passes. I think you have to be in the mid-60s in the CFL, really, or be a really elite deep ball thrower, which I think Cornelius has the capability to be. He has a big arm, has great physical tools, but we'll see if he can put it all together in his third CFL season in 2023. I just have a little bit of questions about him still, so we'll see if he can really improve with all those playmakers that they brought in this offseason. I also think the back eight on defense is particularly weak. I think that linebacking core, besides Niles Morgan, I don't think is very special. I think Niles Morgan is really that key to that defense, like I was saying before, in terms of stopping the run in particular. Big difference when he was in the lineup versus when he was out of the lineup last year. I think the secondary has some holes, like I was mentioning before. So I think the back eight of the defense has some questions about it. And then I think the offensive line in general has some questions about it as well. It kind of underperformed my expectations for them last year. I had them ranked pretty high, but I think overall they didn't really show the progression that I thought I would see from them. So ultimately, I think it's one of their weaknesses going into this year. So now turning over to talk about the first 5 weeks of their schedule, starting with week 1 versus Saskatchewan. And I do think this is going to be a very, very crucial game for the Edmonton Elks this season. I know it's cliche, the first week of the season, you wouldn't think it's that important, especially in a 9-team league. But I think it's very important for Edmonton in particular, because if they can go out, break that home losing curse the first week of the season, it could really set the course for a completely different season here in 2023. So I'm very excited to see them play Saskatchewan, who they played very well in the games they played against them last year. So we'll see what happens for that week 1 game. One of the ones I'm looking forward to the most. And then week 2, they're at BC. Should be interesting to see how they do in these West Division games that they kind of struggled in last year. And then week 3, they're home against Toronto. Should be interesting, usually an advantage for those Western teams when those Eastern teams travel out West. So we'll see if Edmonton can take advantage and get 2 or 3 wins in the first couple weeks of the season. Then they're at Ottawa. They played pretty well on the road last year, so we'll see if Edmonton can steal a road win there. And then they're against Saskatchewan again, this time on the road in week 5. So I think at the end of the day, getting off to a good start is more important for Edmonton than a lot of teams in the CFL. Because of their history the past couple of years, really trying to build a winning culture there in Edmonton. So I'm very interested to see how they do to start off the year. And then in terms of my overall predictions for this team this year, I think they're improved. They only finished with 4 wins last year, so either way, I do see them as a win improvement this year for this team. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be a huge jump. I think it's going to be between 6 and 9 wins. 9 wins, I think, could get you into that crossover third place in the West conversation, which would be a successful season, in my opinion, given where they were last year. If they can make a jump to that level of team, I think would be a success, at least in my mind. So at the end of the day, that's where I probably see them finishing. I don't know, maybe everything clicks for this team. They go 12-6, 13-5, first or second in the West. But at the end of the day, I think the quarterback position is just a little bit too uncertain at this point for me to declare that. There's too many holes elsewhere on the roster as well, in my opinion, at least on paper. So we'll see if Chris Jones can work his magic with this group. But at the end of the day, that's where I see them finishing in the 2023 CFL season. And with that said, let me know what you guys think of the 2023 Edmonton Elks and what you expect from them in the comments section. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.